Welcome back to Between the Lines. I'm your teacher, Adam Webb. I hope you've been watching my poetry lessons. I have a detailed video lesson on each of the CSEC English B poems, as well as a video on the devices. If you've been watching those lessons, then you might notice that this video looks and perhaps even sounds quite different. That's because we'll be doing something very different today. In this video and in other videos to come, we'll be working through the poetry essay questions on past English B papers. We'll go through questions from the January 2019, June 2019, January 2020, January 2021, June 2021 papers. We'll be going through all of these questions. This channel is focused only on the poetry section of the exam, which is one of 3 sections. Be sure to find resources on the other 2 sections if needed. In this video, we'll be looking at one of the 2 poetry questions from the January 2019 paper. Before we do that question, we'll look into 2 things. We'll look at the mark scheme that CSEC uses, and we'll look at the general format that you should use to write your essay. Okay, first of all, let's take a look at the mark scheme. So just a reminder, the total number of marks that you can get is 35 marks. This would be a perfect score. So let's look at how those 35 marks can be acquired. For language and organization, you have a maximum of 10 points. Excellent to superior would be 10 points. And in order for you to get these 10 points, you have to demonstrate excellent to superior organizing skills, essay format with coherent presentation of points, effective linkages, well-executed introduction, paragraphs, blah, blah, blah. I'll be showing you all of this in the first part of this video. Basically, how you organize your points to get those 10 marks. And of course, sentence structure, paragraph structure, all of this would be under the umbrella of language and organization. So that's only 10 of the marks. The other 25 marks will be under the actual content. And all this is basically saying, you know what you're talking about. You have a deep understanding of the poems, and all of your points are well fleshed out. Of course, you can pause the video, take a screenshot, and read through this in detail. But for now, I'm just gonna jump into the next segment, in which I'll take you through the essay format that you need to use. Just before I take you through the format, let's look at this question a second time. As usual, for the poetry section of the exam, you can choose between 2 questions, question 3, question 4. The formatting of both questions is exactly the same, except for one thing. In question 3, you will be given 2 poems that you need to write about. So you have no choice in what poems you write about. In question 4, you will be able to choose what 2 poems you want to write about. Anyhow, in this video, we'll be tackling question 3. In the next video, we'll be tackling question 4. So let's read through the question, and then we'll look at the essay format and how this question and all questions, basically, all the poetry questions, can be written in that format. So, little boy crying and the woman speaks to the man who has employed her son. Deal with issues of parenting. Write an essay in which you focus on this theme in the 2 poems. For each poem, describe a decision each parent has to make about his or her child. You must also discuss how one of the decisions described impacts the parent. Finally, for each poem, you must examine one device the poet uses to portray the challenges of parenting. Based on this question, a perfect essay will be 5 to 6 paragraphs and about 700 words. That's a lot of writing, compared even to the longest writing task on the CSEC English A paper. Okay, so as we look at the different parts of the question, you might realize there are actually 3 parts that you must answer. Looking at these different parts, I'll take you through the format that you'll use. Okay, at this point, it would be good to get out your notepad or your notebook and actually take some notes. I'll be using this notepad here. It's a very basic notepad, and I'll just be going through the essay format. I'll make this smaller. Okay, so we're focused on question 3. So here we're doing the essay format, and this essay is going to be 5 to 6 paragraphs. Yeah, these questions require 5 to 6 paragraphs. You're looking at about 600 to 800 words. So yeah, that's the first thing you should know. You should know how many words you're aiming to write. 600 to 800 words. That seems like a lot, but it will be just enough. You will see. Okay, so these are the notes for you guys. Paragraph 1, intro. Okay, let's say introductory paragraph. Paragraph 2, it's going to be the theme, or we can say content. Both poems. Your intro paragraph is going to mention all 3 parts of the question. I'll go into how to write a perfect intro in just a moment. So the 3 parts here: describe a decision each parent has to make about his or her child. That's part 1. You must also discuss how one of these decisions impacts the parent. That's part 2. And for each poem you examine one device. That's part 3. So in the intro you're going to briefly mention all 3 parts. In your second paragraph, you're going to be looking at the first part of the question, which will be about a theme. So in this case, it would be describe a decision each parent has to make about his or her child. So you'll answer this piece of the question in paragraph 2. In paragraph 3, it's going to be something about one speaker. In this case, you must also discuss how one of the decisions described impacts the parent. I'll show you some other past paper questions. They all look like this. In older past papers, the second part of the question usually asks you to talk about both poems. But since 2018, it's been just one. So you talk about both poems in the first part, but then you zone in on one poem for the next part. Your fourth paragraph is going to be about the last part of the question, which is always devices. So devices in both poems. Pay attention to these all caps words. Both, one, both. 2, 1, 2. That is the formation. 2, 1, 2. The final paragraph is going to be your conclusion. I'm going to get into how to write a good conclusion. It's a common misconception, a mistake students often make. They think that a conclusion is just one sentence. I hereby conclude my essay. That's not a conclusion. We'll go into how to write a proper conclusion. Your conclusion is going to be the last thing that the marker reads. So if your conclusion is weak, it kind of weakens your entire essay. You need a strong opening, a strong middle, and a strong end. Everything must be strong if you want to get these 35 marks. We're aiming for 35 marks, not 34, not 20, 35 marks. I'm going to show you how to get there. Right, so you might notice that I have 5 paragraphs here, yet I say 5 to 6 paragraphs at the top. Let's make a little note here. If a paragraph is too long, you split it into 2. Try not to go over. So let's say you're talking about the themes of both poems, but After talking about only one poem, you already have what looks like a big paragraph. It doesn't make sense for you to write a super long paragraph just to keep the form. So you would just write about the other poem in another paragraph. CSEC does not stipulate that you need exactly 5 paragraphs. So if a paragraph is getting too long, you can split it at a logical point. We have this 2-1-2 formation. You talk about the theme or content of both poems. Something about one speaker, devices in both poems. Let's see if this format holds true for all of these questions that we're going to be looking at over the course of the next couple of videos. So we see how it holds true for this. You talk about the decision that each parent makes, and then I talk about one decision, and then I talk about the devices in each poem, device in each poem. Let's look at this one. What if we were to do question 4? So here, for each poem, so 2, both poems, for each poem describe the situation, blah, blah, blah. Then, part 2, you must discuss the impact of the suffering on one speaker's outlook on life. So you zone in on only one speaker. And then, the third part is going to be about both poems. Finally, for each poem, you must examine one device. Devices in each poem, in both poems. What about June? Ooh, this is ugly. I apologize. It's an essay in which you focus on this theme in 2 poems. Both poems. Yeah? And then, you must discuss one speaker's attitude. One speaker. And then, for each poem, you talk about one device. Both poems. And if we look here, it's the same thing. For each poem, and then one speaker, and then each poem. And if we go to 2020, 2021, it's going to be the same. That is how they're doing it. So you're going to talk about both poems, then one poem, then both poems. And of course, you start with the intro, you end with a conclusion. That is the essay format. Now, how do you write a perfect intro? What does it mean to write a perfect intro? Let's look into that. And then we'll actually get to work on the essay. Intro paragraph is going to be, let's say 5 to 7 sentences. This is what you're aiming for your intro paragraph. You're going to start with that is the first part of the intro. It's going to be 1 to 2 sentences. What is a hook? The hook is an interesting, an exciting, a fascinating statement that is basically there to grab your reader's attention. So you want to start the essay by mentioning something that sounds intriguing, something interesting, just in 1 or 2 sentences. Nothing you should really be busting your brain about. Don't take 5 to 10 minutes to write a hook, because it's just getting things started in an interesting way. 1 to 2 sentences, and then after that you're gonna mention both poems and connect them to the hook in 1 sentence. So after you write a hook, you need to tell us what 2 poems you're going to be writing about. In telling us what these poems are, you're gonna somehow connect it to the hook. I will demonstrate, so don't worry. After that, you're going to answer each the question in 1 to 2 sentences each. What do I mean by this? So after your hook, after you mention what poems you're going to be looking at, then you're going to give us a just a 1-line or a 2-sentence answer for part A, which in this case would be describe a decision that each parent has to make. Just tell us what the decision is for each poem. No explanation, no examples, just tell us what the decision is for each poem. And then Part 2 would be, you must also discuss how one of the decisions impacts the parent. Just tell us how the decision impacts the parent in one line, no explanation. You will be explaining in the body of the essay. And then the third part, just mention what device is used in each poem. Just mention the device, no explanation, just mention it. So all of this will be fitted into your intro. So basically, if I read your intro, I should see a summary of your entire essay. So the intro is going to introduce the points you're going to discuss, and then each body paragraph will discuss one of those points introduced in the intro. That's what the intro does. Now we are actually ready to get down to business. Okay, so now we know what the essay format is. When you go into the exam and you choose a question, before you start writing the essay, you need to plan what you're going to write. The planning, it's good if you can plan in 5 minutes or less. If you can do a proper plan in 5 minutes, you'll have about 35 minutes in which to write 700 words. That's good. For this plan, I just need to know the points I'll be making in the body of the essay. And from this plan, I'll be able to write the intro, and from the intro, I'll be able to flesh out the essay. So, part 1 has 3 parts, remember. Part 1 is about a decision that each parent has to make. In Little Boy Crying, yes, LBC. What decision do I want to talk about? Let's say, okay, the parent has to choose about a decision to be made in Woman Speaks, TW, the woman. The decision, there are a few decisions. Okay, let's work with this one. The woman must decide if she will raise the child even without his father. Okay, so I have my points for part 1. Part 2 of the question says I must discuss how one of the decisions described impacts the parent. So part 2, impact on character. Which one would be easier for me to write about now? Decision in Little Boy Crying, or the one in The Woman Speaks? Little Boy Crying. What is the effect? So in the poem, the father decided to slap his son, and that affected him. How? The father feels guilty. He felt guilty, I think, for punishing his son with a slap. Okay. And part 3 of the question. This will be the same for all of the questions. Finally, for each poem, you must examine one device each poet uses to portray the challenges of parenting. So, devices that portray the challenges. For me, this is the easy part. I like devices. In Little Boy Crying, For part 3, it's very important that you're able to cite examples from the poem. Choose devices for which you can cite examples. So you really need to know the poems. For a little boy crying, I know the father is a giant and an ogre. And there's a line about tears scar him behind. It's just the plan, so these might not be the exact words, but I'm just jotting my ideas down. There's a metaphor about tears. He's wearing a mask. Giant ogre. This is all metaphoric language. So I know I'll be able to flesh that out. For the woman speaks. What device? Metaphor. Yeah, there are quite a number of metaphors in this poem. What examples can I think of? She raised him twice, once as mother, once as father. That's metaphorical. She didn't literally raise him twice. What else happened metaphorically? She was throwing a partner with Judas's mother and so on. Okay, throwing a partner. So basically, I'm confident that I can answer all 3 parts of the question. I can talk about the decision made in both poems, the impact on this character here, and Little Boy Crying, and devices in both poems. So that's my plan, and that should take about 5 minutes in the exam. If you cannot, if while writing your plan you realize that even one part of the question is too difficult and you don't know what to write, you can't find examples, then maybe you need to go back and choose the other question. And if neither question seems possible, well, get a time machine and do some studying, do some practicing before taking the exam. Alright, so we have our format, we have our plan, we have our question. All we need to do now is to actually write that essay. So let's do that now.